In 1973, a man named Nathaniel Wyeth invented what is considered to be the world's first plastic drinking bottle, but in fact, it was not. It was, though, the world's first polyethylene terephthalate water bottles. And these bottles are the first bottles that could withstand carbonation. And that's just amazing, because now they are all over our oceans. But that is not the point here. Now see, all the way back in 1894, a man named John Wesley Hyatt invented the celluloid plastic bottle. And the celluloid plastic bottle is a plant-based bottle that was very flammable and flimsy and would kind of bend in all the time. Now let's fast forward to 1933, when a group of chemists from England discovered polyethylene. They did this by complete sheer accident, and they were just mixing together ethylene and benzaldehyde, and their equipment was a little bit faulty, and at some point oxygen leaked into the reaction tube, and they noticed a waxy substance gaining over the top. And that was the discovery of polyethylene. And just 2 years later, polyethylene became commercially available all throughout England. Now let's fast forward again to 1947, when the first commercially available water bottles were actually out on market. And they just weren't a major success. They weren't a huge hit because they were big and bulky, had quite a bit of weight and heft, and so a lot of people didn't want to sit there and carry them around, just like glass bottles. But glass bottles are a little bit more stylish. And now with polyethylene being completely commercially available, let's fast forward one more time, 3 more years, to 1950. And at this point is when polyethylene was actually starting to be used in plastic drinking bottles. Made them a lot more lightweight, easier to form. It was just a huge success. I know I've said it once and I'll say it one more time, but let's fast forward to 1973, when Nathaniel Wyeth patented the first polyethylene terephthalate plastic bottles. And these bottles were the first bottles that could withstand carbonation. And most people associate these bottles with being the first bottles, but if you've watched up until this point, you know that they aren't. And for some reason, only in 51 years, these bottles have completely clogged up our oceans, thousands and thousands of times over. They litter our shores everywhere, our streets. Everything has these bottles, and they were only invented 51 years ago, and that is just insane to me. We need to do better, everybody. We just need to do better. In Detroit, Michigan, in 1915, William Eno erected the stop sign. It was originally a square sign that was black with white lettering saying stop. Though I have seen a few reports saying that a police chief came up with the idea, though that's not really corroborated. In England in 1921, a man named James Biggs invented the modern white cane, used for blind people. And he developed the idea after he went blind in an accident and proceeded to paint his dark walking stick white so people could see him better on the motorways. And in 1930, a man named George Bonham proposed to paint the canes white with a red stripe. This would indicate to motorists that the people wielding these canes had a disability in their eyes and could not see them that well, giving them the right of way. In 1590, a man named Nicholas Gallier invented bear traps. His first bear trap invention was made out of wrought iron and wood, though the coming centuries, up until the 1800s, bear traps were still made out of wrought iron and wood, though by that point they started transitioning into being made out of steel. And with that, they also started getting various different sizes to be used for different trapping. Now, bear traps are pretty much illegal in, I want to say, about a quarter of the states of the US, though they are still universally seen as one of the most effective trapping methods. Sponges have been being used since ancient Greece, but the modern sponge has only presumed to be around since 1837 when a man named Otto Bayer was working in the mop industry. I'm assuming that he was kind of just pushing a mop, to be honest with you, but I have no idea. I'm assuming that he was just cleaning some floors and went and sprayed down polyester foam, which is also referred to as ester in the mop industry, I guess. I don't know. But ever since then, sponges have kind of just been being made out of polyester foam. Now, don't get me wrong, sea sponges and ocean sponges are still used and used commonly throughout the entire world, but most people in America will see a polyester foam sponge before they see a sea sponge. On March 25th of 1857, a Frenchman named Edouard Leon Scott de Martinville invented and patented the phonautograph, which was the precursor to the record player. The phonautograph was the first device to be able to record sound, and how it would do so is by taking in sound from whatever source and distributing that onto a paper film-like substance that would then be wrapped around a tube and let to dry, and then later on it would be able to be played. I'm not exactly sure how it all works, but that's, from what I could understand, how it worked. A Swiss chemist in the 1930s discovered the necessary reaction to create what was eventually coined as epoxy resin. And the name of this Swiss chemist was Pierre Castan. And just a couple of years later, in 1943, epoxy was synthesized by a man named Paul Schlack. And it eventually became commercially available in 1946 at the Swiss Industry Fair. The Ojibwe Native American tribe that ranged from Canada all throughout North America had believed that dreams, both good and bad, would fester in the air and kind of just build up, get worse and worse and worse, and throughout time, people just consistently started having nightmares, night terrors, all of the sorts. And so they invented dream catchers, or dream webs, or dream nets. There's various names for them, but those are the three most common names that I've seen. And typically what a dream catcher is it's literally just a circle made out of, a lot of the time it would be made out of wood, and then just tetherings tying leather into it. And a lot of the time they would actually have an opening rather than just a main faceplate, but mine has just a main faceplate. The legends for dream catchers actually state that dream catchers, the webbing would catch bad dreams, while the hole or the centerpiece would allow good dreams to just pass straight through and go to the dreamer. My name is Wyatt, and today we'll be covering the history of helicopters. And this history starts all the way back in 400 CE in China, when there was a kite that was kind of ran similar to a helicopter. It ran off of a rotor system to keep it propelled in the air and make it go vertically. This idea wasn't translated up until 1483, when the one and only Leonardo da Vinci designed his own helicopter. And this helicopter was known as a Northipdopter flying machine, and it never actually got built, but it's presumed that if it did, it would have actually worked. And that's just insane to think about. That somebody way back when, granted, he was a mastermind, he was a genius, but nonetheless, somebody back then being able to design something that could have worked with little to no knowledge about how it needed to work. Let's fast forward just a little bit more to 1754, when a man named Mikhail Lomonosov designed a little toy helicopter based off of a Chinese toy that used a wind-up spring to actually stay hovering up in the air. And then 30 years after that, two Frenchmen named Lanoy and Bienvenu designed a little toy helicopter out of feathers. Now let's fast forward a few more good years to 1843, when a man named Sir George Cayley designed and invented what was known as the aerial carriage. And the aerial carriage was a man-powered four-rotor machine where these four rotors were on each corner of a platform. And it was built, but it was never actually went into the sky. It never took flight. It never flew. And 18 years later, in 1861, a man named Gustave de Ponton de Amarcourt designed a steam-powered helicopter model, and it never actually took flight or anything from what I could figure out, but he did also coin the term helicopter. And now just 17 years after that, in 1878, a man named Enrico Forlani designed a unmanned steam-powered helicopter, and this helicopter would actually hover for about 20 seconds. But it wasn't until September 14th, 1939, when the first successful flight was taken in the helicopter named the SV-300, designed by Igor Sokovsky, and this helicopter changed the whole history of flight for humanity. This helicopter, it was tethered during its first flight, but it showed that we could gain success with this actual kind of movement. If you liked this, in 1935, Stanton Avery of Avery Label Company created the first sticker when he created the first self-adhesive label. Though it is believed that in ancient Egypt, stickers were being made by taking papyrus paper and some random adhesive materials. Not really much, information about that. These stickers, most of the time, aren't even called stickers, though they are universally considered the very earliest version of an adhesive sticker. And when they were being used a lot in Egypt, they were being used for market signs and pricing labels on items to buy, and all of these different various uses for labeling stuff. Encased within the walls of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City is the world's oldest functioning piano. And the name of this piano is the Gravicembalo Cole Piano E Fort Harpsichord. This piano was built in 1720 by Bartholomew Cristofori, who is also known for creating the modern piano. This piano is not the only one held within the walls of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, though it is the oldest piano held within its walls. The steam engine was invented in 1712 by Thomas Newcomen, and the engine completely ran with way too much fuel and didn't give enough power output, but it was still a success. In 1776, James Watt and his partner kind of created a new model of it, not really, just ever so slightly changing some of the internal structure of it, though that made it to where the fuel consumption was adequate enough for the output power, and it was a huge success. Now, in 1846, Nicholas Otto, a German, made and patented the very first, or what's credited to be the very first successful gas-powered engine. And gas is in the states of matter gas. Where in 1872, George Brayton invented the very first liquid combustion engine. Just a few years after that, Brayton and a man that he partnered with that I could not find any information on invented the four-cylinder stroke engine. And then this one's honestly the most wild to me. The first electric motor was invented by Moritz Jacobi, and that was in 1834. And it had surprisingly extremely high output for its fuel consumption. It was revolutionary, but it was barely touched. I don't even think it was touched at all. I could not find anything that it was actually used for or put in. It was just kind of scrapped. The idea was just thrown away for some reason. In the year 1900, in Illinois, a man named Robert Montgomery invented the modern Fleischwater. This device was patented as the fly killer, and it was a wire netting on a handle. In 1903, Montgomery sold his patent to a man named John Bennett, who improved the design by stitching plastic around the netting. And in 1990, a man named Cao Shi invented the electric Fleischwater. Did you know that Leonardo da Vinci designed a helicopter that would have worked? In 1889, two men, one of which was named William Arnold and the other Louis Glass, invented the jukebox. The original jukebox was a modified Edison Class M phonograph. And the term jukebox actually didn't originate until somewhere in the 1930s. Jukeboxes were originally called automatic coin-operated phonographs. These original jukeboxes were given a nickname of nickel in the slot machine. And how these machines would operate is kind of self-explanatory. You'd put a nickel into the slot machine, and it had a crank on it that you would have to sit there and crank to actually play the music. The music would come and reverberate through multiple listening tubes. The original jukebox, the very first one, was built in Palais Royal Saloon in San Francisco. In 1906, two men living in Phoenix, Arizona, named Garrett Elmore and Oscar Palmer, were given a patent for the world's first swamp cooler, or what is also known as an evaporative cooler. It wasn't until 1908 that Oscar and Garrett had actually installed their first ever swamp cooler, and in 1916, the first Aspen Pad cooler was used in the Adams Hotel in Phoenix, Arizona. Along with that, swamp coolers are used all throughout the United States and the world, from what I'm aware of, but Arizona still dominates in the amount that there are. In 1800, Alessandro Volta invented the battery, which is just mind-boggling. He was a researcher that was researching electromagnetism, and for him to continuously keep researching it as vigorously as he would have liked to, he needed a continuous power source, and there wasn't one up until 1800, when Alessandro Volta invented the battery. Okay, freezers were invented in 1857, and how they originally worked was nothing electronic, nothing like that. They used chemicals. You want to know the chemicals that they used? They used ammonia and sulfur, two of the most heavily dangerous chemicals to humans. They used those to freeze everything inside of ice boxes. How did more people not die? I don't know. I don't. Freezers started to hit the shelves heavily in 1940s area, though the preceding years after that is when all of the actual development of the technologies came into fruition, and that's when we started creating ice and such with our freezers. Humans have been preserving food for millennia, and there has been thousands upon thousands of different methods for preservation. But the main common method that we see nowadays is canning in mason jars. There was canning before that, but it wasn't widespread like it is with mason jars. And the funniest thing about the whole thing is that freezers came out a year before mason jars did. And so for millennia, we were just using wax rings to seal our jars, and we were using snow to freeze our meats. But in the 1700s, modern-day food preservation began. Humans have been caring for their hygiene for a lot longer than a lot of people seem to believe. And we can peep this by looking all the way back to ancient Greece and ancient Egypt, when they were taking these ancient sea sponges and scrubbing themselves to clean themselves. They also had various different types of perfumes, various different types of toothbrushes, just various different types of ways to actually redeem your physical qualities, make yourself look and feel better. But in 3300 BC, we were given our first evidence for human-made hygiene efforts. And how this system would work was it was an entire waterway system built underneath a European castle in medieval Europe, which is insane. This water system would run bathtubs, showers, faucets, all of the amenities that we commonly know today. And that's just insane to me. Like, dude, we found a bathtub which was completely made out of marble in Pompeii, which that was completely destroyed 2,000 years ago, which, that's wild to me, but an entire marble bathtub was being used all the way back then. And now it was somewhere within 1880 to 1883 that a man named David Buick invented an extremely revolutionary product. And this product was more so a method, and this method was being able to put enamel or enamel paint onto cast iron. And that kind of just skyrocketed everything. And in 1883, a man named John Michael Kohler invented the first common bathtub. And this bathtub was invented in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and it was actually just a horse trough made out of cast iron that he proceeded to take enamel coating, coat the entire thing of it, and install 4 legs on the bottom of it. And then proceeded to just drill a hole in the center and make a cork stopper for it. And then we had the bathtub, baby. This bathtub made by Kohler, due to its style and just look, was known as the bath trough. And mind you, I just want to let you know that I am exclusively talking about bathtubs that have their own plumbing and can fill themselves, rather than having to fill up a singular bucket or multiple buckets and just dumping these buckets into the tub. Every year, roughly there are 4 million tons of paper produced throughout the entire world, and within a ton there are 200,000 pieces of individual paper. And with that, each year there are 80 trillion pieces of paper produced by the world. The origins of playing cards is hotly debated, but most people can agree that they either originate from China or Persia during the 9th century. Now, they didn't make it to Europe until the 13th century, and most sources say that they made it to Italy first during 1360 or somewhere right around there. Now, these original decks of cards were very similar to what we have nowadays, with 4 suits being swords, coins, polo sticks, and goblets, containing 10 different number cards along with 3 court cards. Those 3 court cards are King, Lower Viceroy, and Upper Viceroy. And by 1480, the French got their hands on it. And what do the French usually do whenever they get their hands on something? Well, they change it however they can. And so they proceeded to change the suits of the cards to diamonds, hearts, clubs, and spades. And not too long after that, the Germans got their hands on it. And when the Germans got their hands on the cards, well, they experimented with them. And they kind of just tried out a bunch of different suits. They had shields, acorns, bells, and roses. And then the English got their hands on them. And when the English got their hands on them, they just decided who the victor of this battle was. And that went to the French, because nowadays we primarily use the diamonds, hearts, clubs, and spades. Now, over the next few centuries, playing cards became commonplace in pretty much every household throughout the entire world. But as soon as the American colonies became a thing, playing cards found their way to America. And during the Civil War, playing cards got the Joker card. The Joker card was not originally there. This Joker card kind of acted as a trump card, and most sources say that it originates from a game named Euchre. And by 1776, America was manufacturing its own playing cards. And the rest is, as they say, history. Have you ever heard of what's called the Kardashev scale? This scale, made by a man named Nikolai Kardashev, is used to rank hypothetical planetary civilizations. The scale has 3 levels and is based off of hypothetical energy usage. The first level of the scale is to be able to store and use all of the solar power that an entire planet, one planet, can produce. The second level is to be able to store and use all of the power of an entire star. And that's where solar megastructures come into play, like Dyson spheres and so on. And the third level of the scale is to be able to harness all of the power of an entire galaxy. So based off of this scale, we as humans haven't even reached a Type 1 civilization yet. Creme dentifrice, also known as modern toothpaste, was invented in 1824 by a dentist named Dr. Peabody. He invented this first toothpaste by taking what was known as dental powder and mixing it with soap. While dental powder is presumed to have been around and used since the ancient Egyptians in 5000 BC. It's also not just Egyptians. Ancient Romans and ancient Greeks are also proposed to have used these dental powders. These ancient dental powders were made from crushed bone, powdered shells, dried herbs, and charcoal. In some cases, tree bark was also used. The microscope does not actually have any concrete inventors, nor a concrete date in which the single-lens microscope was invented, though it was most likely in the late 1400s to early 1500s when the single-lens microscope was invented. But there is pretty heavy and kind of obscure record of a man named Zacharias Janssen making the first double-lensed microscope, and that was in the 1600s. Ice cream has been around since at least the 2nd century BC, though one of my favorite facts now is that Alexander the Great thoroughly enjoyed ice cream. He had a bunch of people just make snow, and then he would flavor it with honey and nectars from various different plants. And that was one of his favorite treats. I couldn't figure out a year or a inventor that actually first created ice cream, though just knowing that Alexander the Great enjoyed ice cream a lot is amazing. In 1887, 2 men, not certain which one did so, but 2 men, one named James Blyth and the other Charles Brush, had invented and built the very first wind turbine. Most wind turbines only have a 25-year lifespan before they stop operating, though the oldest one in history that is still operating has been generating power for 41 years. In 1859, J.W. Haynes invented the first successful working flume. What a flume is a V-channel shaped structure that runs water through it to carry heavy objects for grand distances. They were primarily used in the lumber industry and used a lot. Haynes filed to patent the design in 1869. The first successful V-flume actually ran a 15-mile route and transferred over 500,000 foot of lumber each day. In 1932, George Blaisdell invented the Zippo lighter. Somewhere in the coming years, Zippo became a company and was founded. During the Vietnam War, soldiers were given Zippo lighters for in case of emergency scenarios with cigarettes and so on, various uses. By 1988, Zippo had reached 200 million independent people and was being used by 200 million people. In the next few years, they kind of just expanded color ranges and designs and personalization features with the lighters. But in 1990, they collaborated with a cigarette artist, and they made the first Zippo that was gas-powered. That first gas-powered model, rather than being actually gasoline or petrol fueled, was a huge failure. But the company persisted, and a couple of years later, they came out with a majorly improved version. It was so much better, and that is now still what is used quite commonly. And then for the last few years, they've just been like one of the best companies ever, dude. Like they've been working with various different people and helping out with nature and wildlife. Great people, great company. Awesome stuff. In 1709, Giovanni Maria Farina actually invented the first cologne. This cologne was intended to be worn by both male and female, unlike how it is nowadays, where most colognes are directed towards men. And the original smell for this cologne was actually said to be shooting for a crisp Italian spring morning. I guess you can't get more specific than that. But the word cologne actually originated from Germany. There's a town in Germany named Cologne where Giovanni Maria Farina invented this first cologne. In 1884, Paul Julius Galib-Nipkow created and invented the very first, as we know it, television. He did so in Berlin, Germany, and the device was called the Nipkow disc. The oldest television that's still in service has been going since 1937. That is 84 years. That's crazy for starters. TV that's still running from 84 years ago. Plus, that was also still uncolored. Color did not get added into TVs until the 1950s. I think that it was 1958. In 1938, a man named Laszlo Josef Bero invented and coined the ballpoint pen after noticing the key difference between fountain pens and the ink cartridges within printing presses, and how fountain pens would smudge while printing presses would dry so much quicker that you wouldn't have the time to be able to smudge it. The fountain pen was either patented by Petrash Pinaru, I think, on May 25th, 1827, or in 1809 in England by Frederick Folsch. I believe that's how it's pronounced, at least. Fruit scones were invented in 1963 by a man named William E. Lamothe.
Turn on the moth signal! I'm on it! Well, I guess we have to do our job now. Dang!
Who at the time was a chairman of the company Kellogg's, which is like Frosted Flakes and Pringles and all that kind of good stuff. He wanted to introduce an at-home toaster-ready pastry for the masses of the world. And within short time span, he actually enlisted the help of a man named Joe Thompson, along with a kitchen crew, to develop this product.
And I told you, we make a good team. I'm the brains, you're the brawn.
By 1964, Lamothe and his team had successfully created and introduced this product into the world, and it was taking off. But there was one major issue with it, and that was the name of fruit scones.
Got a very sensitive gag reflex. Oh dear.
Let's be real. Fruit scones is very unappetizing.
And the mixture of that and that.
Just a big nope for me.
Are you alright? Do you want to...
Oh, sorry.
So, based off of the pop culture movement going on in the 1960s, and largely believed to be specifically from Andy Warhol's art, they were renamed to Pop-Tarts. When Pop-Tarts were first introduced to the market, there was 4 unfrosted flavors, and yes, I did say unfrosted, because there wasn't a good enough frosting to withstand the temperatures and just kind of being in a toaster.
Cinnamon Bun offered to fill the position, but he's kinda half-baked.
And so they were unfrosted. There was strawberry, blueberry, brown sugar cinnamon, and apple currant. But within a couple of years, apple currant was renamed to apple berry. It took about 3 more years, but by 1967, the team behind Pop-Tarts had also successfully developed the frosting to go on these pastries. And this was revolutionary. They sent out what was known as Concord grape, raspberry, brown sugar cinnamon, and something called Dutch apple. This sounds so good. All of them with frosting, of course, because they just invented it and they're just gonna push it out now. And that is what we now know for Pop-Tarts is, like, I've never seen a Pop-Tart that does not have frosting on it. Okay? Legitimately. Never in my life. Apparently they existed.
In 1899, 2 men named Wilbur and Orville began a 4-year research and development project. And this project would bring a whole new era to the entire world. And these 2 brothers' last names was Wright. And they invented the first powered airplane. The development for what would become known as the Wright Flyer ceased in 1903 due to its completion. What came first, the toilet or the plunger? Well, from what I'm completely aware of, the toilet actually came first, with being invented in 1775 by Alexander Cummings, and it wasn't until 1777 when Samuel Prosser and his team invented the first plunger. This plunger was actually called a plunger closet, and it was based off of the Greek siphon system. The year is 1868, and a man named Benjamin Waddy Maugan, I'm not sure if that's 100% correctly pronounced, he was born in London, England, and this year he invented and patented the very first conventional water heater. This water heater wasn't very successful because it was viewed as extremely dangerous. It was known as the gas geyser, and in fact, it didn't have any ventilation system, and so you couldn't release the pressure. They kind of exploded a lot. But by 1889, a man named Edmund Rudd from Ostfold, Norway, invented and patented the second conventional water heater,
And this water heater, he proceeded to just take the notes from Maugan.
Mr. Brenner, the president is waiting for you in the Oval Office.
Somebody's more important. Freddie, can you keep the riffraff out of here?
I'm gonna be honest, he just looked at it and was like, alright, well, this was an issue, this was an issue, and this was an issue, so let's fix those issues, and then we've got an amazing product. And that's exactly what he did. He proceeded to add a ventilation system so it wouldn't explode, and he added various different temperature gauges so you could actually tell the temperature a lot better, and you could actually change the temperature a lot easier.
Did you touch the thermostat? Did you turn it up?
Oh, of course not. Did somebody fiddle with the thermostat?
It's 85 degrees.
85? Do you have any idea how much even a few degrees can impact the gas bill?
Of course I do. It's unthinkable.
But you all gotta understand that these two water heaters that I just talked about are gas water heaters, not electric. And so Maugan and Rudd, they decided that they'd try and kind of capitalize off of this gas market that's growing and growing.
Did you pay the gas bill?
Every household was beginning to have gas in it, and so they decided they'd try and capitalize off of it. And Maugan wasn't so successful, but Rudd seemed to be extremely successful. From what I can tell, he had at least 14 different patents for different water heaters, and starting with that first one and just making his way more and more and more, making them better and better and better and more conventional, and people could more easily access them and use them and get them. And so it became an extreme commodity. But it wasn't until 1929 when a man named Steibel Eltron from Berlin, Germany, invented the tankless water heater. And that's what most people have in their homes today, is a tankless water heater that heats via electronics, not gas.
We're from the gas company.
Do you remember those number 2 pencils? And if you do you ever remember thinking about why they were named number 2 instead of number 1? Well, graphite actually works off of a thickness scale, meaning how well it shows up on paper. And if you really want to get technical with it, it actually works off of a graphite to clay ratio system. The scale starts at 1 and often goes up to about 8 with those super thick artist pencils and super thick carpenter pencils. And number 2 is what's considered the Goldilocks zone on this scale, with that being the almost perfect thickness for showing up on paper, with it being very visible. And that is why number 2 pencils are the number 1 pencil. In 1858, there was a man named John Landis Mason who invented and patented the mason jar. Before the invention of mason jars, there were plenty of other methods for sealing glass jars, but most of them would involve heating up a ring of wax, which was just very cumbersome in small buildings and households. In the year of 1882, a man named Edward H. Johnson strung together 80 individual lights comprised of red, white, and blue colored lights. And he did this and strung them around his Christmas tree. Just because at the time they would use these little candles that you'd hang on a tree, which of course, putting fire on a tree is not the best idea.
Well, the camera.
And so this was commonplace up until 1920s, when lights became a lot more conventional and a lot more cheap. And so with that, this is one of the only cases that I've ever looked into about any kind of lighting or electronics that Thomas Edison was not given credit for. This guy is, in technicality, Thomas Edison's partner, but it is not Thomas Edison that actually garnished the credit for it, which is insane. Now, Johnson powered the entire system with a generator, and since that fateful day, this has been a tradition throughout the entirety of the world, primarily in the United States, but through the entirety of the world.
In 1793 or 1797, two men, one named George Dunnage and the other John Hetherington, were credited to be the first creators of the top hat. Neither at the same time. There's just a lot of scrutiny in between of which one actually did so. Though I am inclined to go with the Dunnage theory because that is earlier, and there are accounts of this man walking his town wearing kind of a wild spectacle of a hat.
Starting back in the 1870s, cigarette cards shown in Red Dead Redemption 2 were an actual real thing, and they were extremely popular, and they would depict various different, popular figures at the time, like actresses, people in various different sports leagues, like baseball cards, and military. There was nature, there was various animals, there was all of these different cards, and they're still sought after today. They're extremely expensive, and they are extremely cool looking, dude. Just look into a couple of these things. They're awesome. Honestly, I might even actually have to end up going and doing a, in-depth video about these cards, because, dude, these are so cool. In 1887, a German-American inventor named Emil Berliner invented the very first record and played it on a gramophone. And I mean a vinyl record, specifically. In February of 1996, Pocket Monsters Red and Green was released on Game Boy in Japan, and this was the first Pokemon game to ever exist. After this game was such a hit throughout Japan, the same year, by October, the trading card game for Pokemon had debuted, and its first lineup was only 102 cards, which is just awesome that they kept it, perfect. Pocket Monsters Red and Green was soon changed to Pokemon Red and Blue to be internationally sold, and by 1999 was being sold in America, along with being sold just completely internationally.